You are listening to the Hiking Radio Network, where we talk the walk with shows by hikers about hikers for everybody.
Mighty Blue on the Appalachian Trail, the ultimate midlife crisis. Join Steve and his guests every week as he staggers from Georgia to Maine.
Hey guys, good to be back with you all again this week. You're listening to Mighty Blue on the Appalachian Trail, and I'm Mighty Blue, or Steve Adams. Now, this week's guest is a bloke who I met at Trail Days last year. He came to my author's table and we had a picture taken together. You'd be surprised how often that happened, by the way. It still surprises me every time somebody wants a picture with me. Anyway, I didn't see Kevin Newsome again until a few weeks ago. Do you remember that I had a bit of a heart scare? Well, one of my old friends, Ed Cleveland, contacted me to see how I was and invited me to a local Kiwanis lunch. The speaker was going to be talking about the Appalachian Trail, so Ed thought I'd love it. I did. Kevin is a natural storyteller, so I invited him to come on the show, and he has. We'll be hearing from Kevin in a moment. The Mighty Blue class of 2022 has certainly taken its lumps this year, but today we've got Sarah Landis, who was due to summit Katahdin this past Monday. We'll hear how she did. And from one success to another, Katie has just passed an important milestone, so we'll be catching up with both those ladies after Kevin. Then, a truly marathon Chapter 6 of Then the Hell Came by George Stephanos. My guess is that I'll be breaking it down into at least 5 parts. So let's get on and meet Kevin Newsome, or Reckless Abandon. Here's Kevin. My guest today is somebody I actually first met at Trail Days a couple of years ago. He stopped by to say hi. We took a photo together while he was on his thru-hike. This is Kevin Newsome, or Reckless Abandon. Hey, Kevin, how are you?
I'm fine. It's good to see you, Steve.
And you. And now you're a photographer. In fact, you've continued to work in that field since the end of your thru-hike last year.
Yeah.
And like me, you're in your mid to late 60s, let's say. How did you decide to do this crazy adventure, and how did you make it work with your career?
With my career, I knew I was getting close to retirement, so I started, making noises like, what would retirement look like for me? I've had a brick and mortar studio for 35 years, so I knew closing it was going to be necessary, at least temporarily. I had initially planned to do this hike in 2020, and I started making plans for it in 2018 when I first sort of came upon this idea that I wanted to go on a thru hike. So my problem was my lease at my studio wasn't going to be due up until 21. And when 2020 rolled around and COVID struck, I had to postpone it till 2021. Up until that point, I was just going to shutter the studio for 6 months and then come back and reopen and finish out my lease. I had paid my lease a year in advance, so I was okay financially. But when I had to postpone it, 21 was the perfect timing. So I closed it completely, put everything in storage. And when I came back, I didn't reopen a brick and mortar. I only service jobs that require an on-location photographer. So that actually turned out pretty good for me.
You mentioned you started thinking about doing the AT in 2018. What precipitated the idea to actually want to do such a hike like this, though?
I walked into a Barnes & Noble one night, and Jeff Alt was giving a presentation about his book called A Walk for Sunshine. And the first person I saw was this woman who was a client of mine. I'd photographed her headshots a few times, and she says, "What are you doing here?" I said, "Well, I saw this Facebook ad on Facebook about this author, Jeff Alt, who hiked the Appalachian Trail, and I thought it sounded interesting. I might, want to sit down and listen." She goes, "Oh, you're going to love him. He's my son." So as it turns out, I knew this guy's mother pretty well, and I sat down and had a wonderful time asking a million questions like everybody does. I sat on the front row and was probably the most vocal, inquisitor of Jeff. And I bought the book. I went home, I read it, and then I needed more. And I went back, I bought another book and another book. Next thing you know, I'd read 21 books and gone down that YouTube rabbit hole of following hikers. And I became obsessed with the idea of doing it. It was such a romantic concept to get away. And especially after 2020, who didn't want to shake that year off?
Yes, yes. But funnily enough, though, it's one of those things that it isn't an idea that automatically comes to mind, is it? So what was it within you when you saw that ad for somebody talking about the Appalachian Trail? Was it already on your radar by then?
Well, the trail was on my radar. I had a friend who had hiked it in 79, he and his brother. And so he and I had talked about it. And I lived in Virginia and camped right near the trail in Shenandoah several times as a young boy. So I was familiar with it. I was never really considering through hiking it, although I would joke about it occasionally while I was out on location. I photograph a lot of conventions. And if you get a convention like in Vegas and you're working at the Mandalay and you're going to walk 8 to 10 miles a day with a 20-pound backpack full of camera gear. And I would joke to people, they say, you carry this thing everywhere. I say, yeah, well, I'm training for the Appalachian Trail. I did that long before I met Jeff Alt. I used to joke about it. And so finally, after I'd read his book and I'd gotten into this vein of information about the trail, I said, this is really something I want to do. I was enthralled with the concept.
It is funny how it grips you, isn't it? And the way in which it comes back to you all the time, you just can't shake it from it. So, and you also told me that you were in pretty good physical shape before you started. How did you manage that? Because normally when we get into our 60s, we kind of fall apart, don't we?
I had been challenged about 5 years earlier by a couple of friends to do P90X, which is a workout, a series of rigorous workouts that are typically designed for people in their 20s and 30s. And here I was in my late 50s at the time. And I was the only one that stuck it out. Everybody else had dropped out. It's a 90-day program. I did it for a year and a half. I did it for 540 days. And I was in the best shape of my life. It was funny because I really didn't have any motivation for doing it other than I just felt like I needed to prepare my body for what comes next. I don't know. Life interrupted. Next thing you know, I dropped my workout regimen. And, here I am starting the trail, having gained 20 pounds over COVID and everything else. And I was really concerned that maybe my ship shape that I had been in was no longer going to help me. But as it turns out, it did.
Well, in retrospect, was the sort of, tell me about the P90X workout. I'd never heard of it before. I'm sure some of our listeners obviously have, but, and how did that get you in? Sorry, was the shape that got you in, was that the right sort of shape you needed for the trail?
I think so. There's a lot of cardio involved in it, and there's a lot of cardio in the trail. You learn, there was a lot of leg workouts and some upper body workouts, but I think the cardio was the most fun part of that workout regimen, and it did help me. I think it gave me a sense that I could run a marathon. I couldn't, but I had been told at one point that if you can run a 5K, you can hike the trail. And so I used to, when I quit my workout, I continued to jog and power walk, a 3.5 mile loop around the neighborhood. And when I got to the point where I could actually run the entire thing without stopping, I said, well, if that's all it takes, if they're right about that, then I'm ready. And I think what happens is the trail does train you. You do learn how to hike. There were people out there far worse shape than I was, and they were still hiking. So, yeah,
by the way, I just put my hand up, listeners, just so you know. Yeah, I was definitely in worse shape than that. So tell us then, I've already told listeners how we managed to meet up again recently, which was at a Kiwanis meeting, and you talked about the Appalachian Trail, which of course was great for me to hear. So let's start in COVID year, which is the year before you actually did the trail. You told me the other day that you did 150 miles over 4 hikes and shakedowns. You're obviously a man who likes to prepare. Talk us through how those individual hikes went and what you actually learned from it. And did it really stand you in good stead for the hike itself?
Yeah, I think it prepared me in a major, major way. First of all, I contacted my buddy who had hiked it in '79, and I said, okay, I've acquired all my gear, and I'm not sure I know how to use everything. Do you want to go for a hike? And so he and his brother and I went and did a 40-mile stretch in the Ocala National Forest on the Florida Trail over 4 days, just 10 miles a day. And they basically taught me how to hang a bear bag, how to use my stove, how to pitch the tent. I mean, they had all this stuff down. They're still hiking to this day, these two brothers. And so after I had done that, we did another 35-mile stretch in the Withlacoochee Forest over a 3-day period. And then I went up to the AT, and I did 4 hikes on the AT and covered the first 150 miles. So I had done everything from Amicalola to Windgap or Fontana, somewhere up in there. I can't remember now exactly where it was.
It's more like Fontana, I think. Yeah. So what did that feel like for you? Because I know that when I stood up there, I'd never hiked before. I had no idea what it was going to be like at all. So walking down from that sign at the top of Amicalola, were you feeling confident, or did you feel ready to go?
I felt excited. I was so excited. I couldn't wait to get up there. And I had some reservations that, I'm a Florida boy, so I'm a sea level guy, and what's it going to do when I get to 4,000 and 5,000 feet? Is the air going to be thin? Is this climb going to be treacherous? What's going to go on? And, each hike was maybe a 30, 40, 50 mile hike. I think the biggest one was an 85-mile hike. And I never felt like it was too much. The challenge was always met, and I always had a smile, and I was dealing with rain and wind and cold. And I was on Preacher's Rock, and the wind must have been blowing 50 miles an hour in the rain. And I was just screaming at the storm, like, bring it on. Is this all you got? I was feeling so excited. So when I went up there for the real hike, I was fully aware that there's going to be bad days, but I was embracing them. I just thought it was the most exciting time of my life. And when I heard people, saying after 3 days on the AT, we had a big storm those first 3 days, that they didn't think they were going to make it. And I said, you ain't seen nothing yet. I've seen much worse, and I've only been up here for shakedowns. So my shakedowns really prepared me for what the terrain was going to be like and what the weather could potentially be like.
Well, Georgia's quite a test, in my opinion, anyway. So it's not as if it's an easy state to start with, as far as I'm concerned. So you got that feeling of starting to feel, what the impact on your body was. So I guess it's fair to say that you were about as prepared and as confident as you could be when you touched the sign at the top of Springer for the real thing. Did the reality of those first few days shake any of that confidence or undermine any of your preparation at all?
Not really. I think I kept my mouth shut, and I kind of kept a little bit to myself. I had a trail family that first week, but everybody was an amateur. There was nobody. Maybe one guy had done enough miles on the AT to feel pretty confident. He ended up hiking all the way to I think Connecticut, because that's where he lived, and he stopped. But for the most part, I was sitting back and just watching all the mistakes that everybody makes that first few weeks. And to me, it was a comedy. I was in hysterics watching people try to hang bear bags, throw that bear line. It was ridiculous, and the little mistakes, they put a carabiner on the end instead of a rock bag, and it wasn't heavy enough to lift the rope and that kind of thing. But, setting their pot on fire because they forgot to take the koozie off. And
I've done that as well, by the way.
A lot of people did. I saw one girl who didn't put the arms of her stove up properly. They weren't locked into position, and after about the time it started to boil, the one arm collapsed and the whole thing fell over, and boiling water went all over the picnic table. And the little things like that, and you're going to make mistakes. Your time is coming. You're going to look like the fool. And I just sat back and relished watching everybody else making a lot of those mistakes. So
it's quite a humbling experience in many ways, particularly those first few weeks, I suppose, when you start to get into what the hike is all about.
Yeah.
Because I don't think, we try to share people's stories here, But what you can only ever know what it's like when you spent, say, 3 or 4 weeks on the trail. You get into that rhythm, don't you, of your hike? And did you find yourself getting into that rhythm quite well?
Yeah, it was really funny in the beginning. I think I had to come to the grips with there is a process which I came to love the process more than the hiking itself. The process is, waking up in the morning and all the steps you have to take to go through to, from getting up to actually starting to walk. And the same process in reverse when you get in camp at night, when you pitch your tent, you build your nest, and you cook your meal, and you hang your bag. So all of those things were a process. In the beginning, my process took me 2 to 2.5 hours. And I couldn't leave camp. I had to get up at 6 to leave by 8:30 or 9. It was ridiculous.
Same as me, exactly. I was terrible.
But towards the end, I was a 30 to 45-minute processor. I could get up and that included cooking breakfast. I had at that point quit drinking coffee on the trail. I still drink coffee. I just wouldn't cook it on the trail. It was too much time. I want to enjoy my coffee.
I really got to be better than about 2 hours, from the time of first and I used to get my alarm would go, or I know the time I wanted to get up, and I'd deliberately undo the air pad. So I just had to get up. It was just horrible, horrible feeling. How did you, or when did you acquire the trail name Reckless Abandon, and why was it?
That was early on. I think it was Gooch Gap. It had rained for the first couple of days, so everything was wet. Everything was muddy. Everybody was looking like drowned rats. The trail was a mudslide. And I had pitched my tent near the shelter, but it was up on a hill. And I was going down to the shelter to cook my dinner. It wasn't raining at the time, so I said, well, I'm just going to go down there and use the picnic table. And I had my 5-pound food bag in my hand. I'm wearing my camp shoes, which had no traction. My tent poles, or my trekking poles, are holding my tent up, of course. Oh. And I had to go down this, maybe a 30-foot decline to get down to the shelter. And I started having to moonwalk to get down it because my feet were sliding faster than I could keep up with. Pretty soon, my feet were moving forward, and I was running. When I hit dry ground, I crashed into the picnic table and threw my food bag across it. And the whole shelter was full of people, and they were all watching me make this approach in a reckless fashion. And they were screaming, "Oh no, look out, here." He said, "Reckless Abandon." And somebody else said, "That should be his trail name." And I didn't embrace it at first. I thought, well, that seems like a really weird trail name. But then again, I guess all trail names are weird. I mean, I've heard some pretty wild ones. So, about a week later, I ran into somebody. I was talking with this young woman, and we were at Wind Gap, and we crossed the road, and there were 2 trails, and I took the wrong one. And she was behind me, and she hollered at me. She said, "Hey, I think you're supposed to be on this trail over here." And I said, "Oh, well, don't mind me. I'm just Reckless Abandon." She goes, "What? You're Reckless Abandon?" And I went, "Well, I guess." Well, I mean, I was just describing my usual self. I wasn't introducing myself. And she says, "I know your son." And I said, "Who?" And she goes, "Your son, is his name Logan?" I said, "Yeah." She goes, "Yeah, he and I served in the Army together. We were both officers in Europe. And, we spent a lot of time together over there." I said, "Well, how did you know about me?" And she says, "Well, I was talking to him online the other day. I had told my son the story of what happened at the shelter. He relayed it to her and said, when she said, 'What's his trail name?' He said, 'I think it's Reckless Abandon. I don't know.'" And so sure enough, at that point, I was stuck with it. I said, "Okay, yeah, I'm Reckless Abandon."
Oh, yeah, you got it.
And that became the trail name for the rest of it, yeah.
And it's a good name as well. And interestingly, also like me, funnily enough, which really shocked me when you said this the other day when you were giving your talk, you also got cellulitis on the trail. I got mine from a dog bite on my 2014 hike. What happened to you?
I got poked by a bramble in North Carolina, and I came down off of Max Patch into Hot Springs, I think it was, and I had as I was going down, it was a 17-mile day, and I thought I had shin splints in one leg only, which I found odd. But by the time I got there, my leg was swelling up. I had a big red blotch on my shin, And I showed it to somebody, and this girl, she was a paramedic in her past life, and she said, "Yeah, you definitely need to go see a doctor. You've got cellulitis." So
wow, that's a quick diagnosis.
She diagnosed it right there in the Laughing Heart Hospital, and I went straight to the doctor the next morning, and they confirmed it. Yep, and they gave me doxycycline, told me to stay off of it for a couple of days. Well, I did for about 3 days in Laughing Heart Hospital. And then I thought, the redness has gone away. The medication has had time to start doing its job. I can muscle through the pain, so I'm going to hike. And I hiked about 34 miles when I knew I was in trouble. My leg was really starting to swell and it was hurting. And I was getting sick to my stomach. And I said, yeah, I got to get off the trail. So I took a shuttle to Irwin. I took a shuttle to Irwin. And I stayed in Irwin for 6 days. I saw another doctor there. I went to the Ballard Hospital. They just, re-upped my doxycycline prescription and said, stay the heck off of it. And I did for about another 6 days.
Where did you stay?
I spent 2 nights at Mountain Inn and Suites. And then I spent, I think, 4 nights or 5 nights at Uncle Johnny's hospital. Interesting.
So
I did work for hire while I was there.
Nice.
just to keep myself busy.
And you told me when we spoke the other day, because we always have a pre-recording conversation, you told me that this was really the only time that you were out on the trail. You actually got depressed because you were pretty happy most of the time out there. How did you cope with that depression? Because that can really take you into a pretty dark place, can't it?
It scared me because I kept having phone conversations with my son and my wife, and I said, "This is really frustrating me because it's every day I don't hike, the goalpost is moving further and further away.
Sure.
I did not know how fast I was going to be able to hike and if I would actually make it to Baxter State Park by October 15th. And, I had planned for a September summit, but, I kind of assumed, without a whole lot of knowledge about the northern terrain. And so I told my wife, I said, this is ridiculous. I possibly could come home and rest, but I'm afraid if I come home and rest, I won't want to go back, or I won't go back. And my wife says, oh, hell no, you're not coming home until you summit Katahdin. You've ruined.
That's the spirit.
She says, you've ruined 2 years of my life planning this. You're not about to come home.
Yeah, you got to get it done now, man.
After that, I said, okay, well then I'll stay here. So I was relegated to Uncle Johnny's hospital for 6 nights, and when I finally got back on it, I was fine. At that point, I took a 33-day stretch without a zero.
Wow!
And then I took 2 zeros in I think Bland, Virginia. I took one in. I took one or two in Damascus. That's what it was.
But getting off trail for an injury, and this happened to me as well, it must have brought you, when you came back on, amongst a whole new sort of cadre of hikers, didn't it? So did you reintegrate easily, or did it feel like you had to restart?
No, I did. I was always a chameleon. I didn't, I think I had 3 trail families when I was on this trail. And the first one would be from like Amicalola to Neil Gap, and then the second one was maybe Neil Gap to probably where I got off trail for cellulitis, because then everybody started passing me, and I'm watching hikers blow by. At some point, I realized I don't recognize any of these people. They all started well after me, and I may never catch up to my friends again. And then when I got to Damascus, they all had shuttled back for trail days, and I walked into trail days on Friday afternoon. So I was right on target for trail days. They were 100, 125 miles ahead of me. And I told them, I said, I'm going to catch you guys before I leave Virginia. And I didn't. I caught them in Pennsylvania.
You still caught them. That's impressive.
I did catch them. And when we did the math, it was 1,250 miles, and they were 125 ahead of me initially. So I walked exactly 10% faster than they did for whatever number of days it took.
Nice.
But and I did hike with them again through a lot of Vermont and New Hampshire, and then another. My last trail family was New Hampshire and Maine, and I love those people. We just had a great time together.
Well, it's such an epic place, such an epic state, and an epic finish. So tell us about your Katahdin day. Did you go up with those people you met in New Hampshire and Maine? Did you go all to the end with them?
Yeah, I did. In fact, I was terrified of climbing Katahdin on the day that they were going to climb it because it was predicted to rain. It had rained already for 48 hours. I knew the trail was soaked. At this point, I've lost 36 pounds and my pack weighs, 10 pounds more than it used to because I'm carrying so much more food. Kind of broken as far as my physical strength is gone. My legs are strong, but everything else was weak. And I was wanting to do Katahdin on a dry day. It wasn't going uphill that bothered me. It was going down. I was terrified of downhill at this point. I was slipping and falling. I mean, I probably fell 5 times in all of, Georgia and North Carolina and Tennessee. I was falling 5 times a day in Maine. And it was, Maine was just such an unstable foot ground. The roots and rocks were just off the charts. And so I was considering letting them, summit on the 10th, and then I would summit, maybe the 12th or 13th, and I would be with people I didn't know. And I finally got to the point where I couldn't get a hotel. I couldn't get a shuttle back into Baxter. There were just so many logistical problems, as you know, trying to navigate the bureaucracy of getting up Katahdin.
Well, I actually fell down the stairs in Millinocket on my last morning when I'm meant to be hiking up Katahdin. I fell the last 5 stairs. And for a second, I didn't know whether I'd broken a leg or an arm. I had no idea until I was lying in a heap at the bottom of the stairs. It was a nightmare. Yeah. So you got up there and you took, actually, I think it was about 5.5 months to finish, which is pretty impressive. It certainly beat both of my hikes. Was it a relief to finish? Or were you sad that it was over?
Well, I think there's this melancholy feeling that you have about it. I was excited to finally, see the finish line on something. I think my body was ready for me to finish. Mentally, I was ready to go back and see my family, but also emotionally, I knew I would miss the trail. I would miss the experience. I would miss that life that I found on the trail that I enjoyed so much. So,
and you did?
Yeah, I wanted to go back not long after I left, but I haven't done any hiking since, and it's been that was in September, so been a little while, almost a year now, and I really want to go out. And I mean, we went back to the Scales in Virginia. My wife and I did, but we drove to the Scales and did trail magic for 2 days, right after trail day. So we fed about 100 hikers in 2 days.
Nice.
So that, but of course I had to buy my wife a tent she could stand up in. So it was not like backpacking at all. We had the car right there with us.
So now, I've not done this before, but one of our listeners, in fact, one of our donors to the show, she asked if I could include a couple of questions that she'd like answers to. Okay. So I thought not because she donates to the show, but that's very, very nice of her to do so. So I'm going to ask you 5 questions, okay?
Sure.
What did you love about the trail?
What did I love? Sleeping in my tent. I loved sleeping in my tent. I could sleep like a baby. So for me, the tent life was very agreeable to my constitution. I absolutely got the best nights, probably after the first month. But sleeping in my tent at night was like the best time of day.
Yeah, I think you have to get used to it, don't you? But once you're used to it, it's great. I know that when I was cold and I would get into my tent and get all my stuff around me and get into my sleeping bag, oh my gosh, that's the most beautiful thing. You start warming up and you get cozy, don't you? And then, of course, you start falling asleep at about 5:30 in the afternoon, which is a bit of a nightmare. Now, her second question was, having asked what you loved about the trail, is there anything that you hated about it?
It's funny. Every state has its reputation, right? I mean, Maine.
I know where. Hang on. I know where we're going with this, by the way.
Well, which one? What do you think it would be? I mean, there's a lot to choose from.
Yeah, well,
I would say that between the rocks in Pennsylvania and the roots in Maine and the mud in Vermont and the mosquitoes in Massachusetts, mosquitoes were probably the most frustrating. Because I never in my life tried to outrun a mosquito. But
they're relentless.
I jogged probably 3 miles through standing water trying to outrun mosquitoes. And it was just the most miserable I think I'd ever felt. But I look back at it, and like I said, I saw every state at its reputation. I saw the muddiest Vermont in history. I saw probably the most mosquito-y Massachusetts in history. I saw Mount Washington with 50 to 80 mile an hour wind gusts, and in the rain. So I had what I think was the epic experience that it's designed to be, and I really, that's what I had read about. That's what I had, come to want. I didn't need it to be sunny and dry everywhere. But the weather was the biggest nemesis, probably my most miserable times. But there were times when I really did enjoy a good rain.
Yeah, well, I remember actually standing, I can't think where it was now, but I was standing somewhere under trees. It was hailing terribly. And it just got, the hailstones were getting bigger and bigger. I thought, this is ridiculous. You just stand here, you're going to freeze to death. So you just have to get out and get walking again, don't you? There's nothing you could do. And the weather, you really are at risk of it. Now, number 3 is, what would you do differently were you ever to do it again?
Let's see. I'd probably carry less clothing. I think I carry too much clothing. So I could probably shed a pound of clothing that I rarely ever wore or didn't wear often enough.
One thing that the trail teaches you is you need a whole lot less stuff in your life, yes, I think, than you ever thought possible, but you really do. And what do you wish that you knew before you started the trail?
I don't know. I think part of the romance of it is that you learn stuff you don't know as you are on that trail. The more you're on that trail, the more you're going to learn. And to me, that's the best part of the experience, is learning things you don't know, meeting people you've never met. I think I was surprised at the demographics on the trail a little bit. I mean, I had been told, well, yeah, it's mostly a male trail, but there's more and more females every year, which is always a good thing. And then there's, there was a large gay population, which I had not been aware of. But to me, that was the most fun I ever had. I think I spent one night in a shelter with about, a dozen or so other hikers, and I was probably the only straight hiker in this shelter. And they were in hysterics at me because they were just, I'm just me. I don't have, a prejudiced bone in my body against, anybody's gender identity. And so to me, they're just hikers. And that's really the best part of the trail, is that there's no politics, there's no agendas. The discussions aren't about what's going on in your past. They're about, where's the next shelter? Where's the next food source? Who's got extra ramen? Who wants to trade this for that? You have immediate concerns that have nothing to do with social media's, noisemakers. And so to me, that was a learned part of the trail that I really appreciated, and I enjoyed the people that I met.
That's very well put. I thought exactly the same as you, but you put it way better than I would have put it. So that was very well put. What was your best? This is her last question. What was your best gear choice?
Best gear choice, a bidet. I literally, yeah.
Oh, please, you're gonna talk me through this. Go on, then, away you go. Knock yourself out.
I am team bidet. I'll tell you this. I started the trail thinking I was, just going to need, toilet paper and a trowel. And yeah, that's true until one day you realize that, sometimes you don't secure. I don't want to get too deep in.
Yeah, but Kevin's starting to look slightly more uncomfortable than he was when he started this answer. But you carry on, Kevin. You're going well.
I would just say that a bidet is a great way to finish off.
Nicely put.
You got to keep things clean, and if you don't, it's going to hurt. And so
Right.
bidet is the answer. And it was so simple. It was so lightweight. It was so inexpensive. I lost 2 of them on the trail. They do tend to pop off the water bottle if you squeeze that thing too hard, and so you got to be careful. But otherwise, the bidet was my most exciting gear choice.
Excellent. Well, so there you go, Betty. They were all for you. So, and I know Betty wants to do the trail soon. So hopefully you learn something by that. And tell me about your choice of a bidet in the future. So you finished. You went back home to Florida. And this is a question I wanted to ask you the other day when you were speaking. I saw you speaking, and the guy didn't pick me to answer questions. To ask questions rather. Did any of your friends or family notice any changes in you?
I don't know if they noticed any changes in me. I don't, other than I wear my beard longer than I ever used to. I cut it completely off a while back and then just grew it right back. But I think they all asked me. Everybody asks, what's different about you now? What do you feel? How did it change you? And I have a hard time pinpointing it. I think it made me a more patient man. I don't feel like I'm in a hurry as much anymore. If I can spend all day and only go 15 miles, then why have I always been upset that I couldn't make it to that stoplight before it turned red? So it made me a more patient person, I believe. I hope that holds out. It's been almost a year. I think it has. And I think it gave me a little more confidence to not fear the risk factor. There's a risk factor to a lot of things. And a lot of people fear the risk factor to the point where they don't take that risk. Whereas now I'm more willing to take a risk because I'm open to the concept that there is a romantic success story at the end of that risk that might be worth the risk. And so I would take it. And I call that swagger in a sense, but it's not an overconfidence of swagger. Cockiness is an overconfidence that's unearned. And swagger is an earned confidence. And if you can hike the entire Appalachian Trail or any great deal of it, I fully believe you've earned your right to have a little swagger in your step. So I feel like I've got a little bit of that, but it's not cockiness. Cockiness is, like I said, an unearned confidence.
My problem was I think I had that swagger before I hiked the Appalachian Trail. I certainly didn't deserve it. I feel I can wander around a bit with a bit more confidence now. Now, are you one and done, or did the trail open an itch within you that you may need to scratch a couple of more times before you can't do it anymore?
I would like to do another. I wouldn't call it a long hike. I'm not open to the PCT or the CDT. I don't think that's in my future. I wouldn't mind doing like the Colorado Trail or the Arizona Trail or the Camino or something like that. I could see a 500-mile hike, but I couldn't see a 2,000-mile hike or 3,000. Those are just out for me. I don't see myself doing 6 months out there. I think it would be fun to do a month here or 6 weeks there. I could see that, but not anything as strenuous as 6 months ago.
Especially after the comment that your wife made about you've got to get, you're not coming home, so you've wasted 2 years of my life or whatever it is. Yeah, I don't think that would go down too well. But look, I really appreciate you coming on, Kevin. It's been fun, and it was great to see you the other day. And I might put the picture that you took of us at Trail Days in our show notes as well. So thanks for coming on, and I really appreciate it. Okay.
Thank you so much. I appreciate you having me. And one last thing, you were the first podcaster I listened to when I got my bug about the trail, and I had listened to probably 100 to 100, the first 100 and so episodes I binge listened to. I mean, I was always on the road driving a lot, and
you need to get a life.
But you were the first podcaster, and somebody had turned me on to you, and she's a section hiker herself. But it was really funny when I saw you at Trail Days. I was excited because you were like one of the icons that inspired me to get going, and I was really happy to have met you at Trail Days. And then when you walked into the Kiwanis meeting the other day after my program, I was like shocked you were there, but it was such an honor to meet you. So thank you so much for all you do.
Well, I appreciate that, and I'm so grateful that you actually recognised me and said, "Steve."
Yeah.
Like I said, that made me feel pretty good. But look, good to talk to you. If you do go again anywhere, let me know, and we'll perhaps get you back on the show. You can talk about that.
Sounds great. Thanks so much.
Okay. Bye.
Bye.
Terrific achievement, Kevin. And in person, he's energetic and engaged. You could tell that on the interview. He certainly got in shape, didn't he? Putting in about 150 miles of shakedown hikes. That preparation clearly served him well. And what about that P90X workout regimen? I'd never heard of it, and I definitely don't want to do it. I mean, I've been training for my TSX challenge, which I'm doing in a couple of weeks, and I've actually lost about 12 to 15 pounds by diet and exercise. I've also given up booze until I return from California to give myself the best chance. But back to Kevin. He spent 6 days in Irwin and Uncle Johnny's. That must have been tough to keep the enthusiasm burning, but he did it, and he got back on with it. Kudos to you, mate. Now, last Monday, I was hoping to hear from Sarah Landis from the top of Katahdin, as she was hoping to finish that day. I didn't hear anything, so I assumed she'd just forgotten. Later that afternoon, I saw on Facebook exactly why she hadn't called. Here's Sarah to tell you why.
Hello.
Hey, Sarah, you accomplished thru-hiker. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm very good. Well, we couldn't record yesterday because I saw your pictures on Facebook. Oh, my God.
Yeah.
Did you have a rainy day or what? But we're going to talk about that in a minute. First up, congratulations.
Thank you.
How are you feeling?
It feels really surreal. I feel like I'm not feeling anything right now. It's like I don't know how to feel.
Yeah. You know what? I don't think we've got a plan for this, have we? We don't know what happens that day of. I think we're planning, we're hoping all the time to hit the summit, and we don't know what to do next, do we?
Yeah, and today just kind of feels like a zero town day.
There you go. You got plenty of those going forward. So you finished yesterday, and I'm recording on Tuesday. You finished on Monday, as you planned to do. But I want to talk about the 100-mile wilderness first. How did that go? How did that go for you?
It went really well. It was incredibly hot, like in the 80s and 90s every day.
Wow.
And we did huge miles every day. We did 3 marathons in a row.
Oh my gosh.
So we did like 24, then 27, then 26 and 26. So we did it in 4 days, but they were pretty hard days.
Yes, I bet they were. Yeah.
But it was beautiful. It was beautiful. We cowboy camped a bunch of the nights, and we went to the top of a mountain and just slept in our sleeping bags up the top of the mountain to we could see the sunrise over Katahdin.
Wow.
On the last day in the 100-mile wilderness. And it was really cool.
Oh, but you've had such an adventure. I mean, I know everybody who goes out there has, but I've seen from your pictures how much you've been enjoying it and so on. So how did the logistics work out? Did you do a drop, or did you just try to get through in 4 days and took 4 days worth of food?
No, we did a drop. So Shaw's dropped us off food 2 days in.
Oh, right. So
we had 2 full days, and then on the third day they gave us food for the last 2 days.
Yeah. And I saw a picture on your Facebook page of you sitting by one of the ponds. And I can't remember the name of that place, but a lot of us did that in 2014, just went and sat down on the rocks right by the water. And it was one of those times when you look like you're having a great time, obviously, but I think people got very inward on themselves and very thoughtful about what was about to come up. How did you feel that night? Because there was only a couple of nights before you actually summited.
Yeah, so I feel like in Maine and in the 100-mile wilderness, where we were just seeing all this water, we were swimming, we were on these beautiful mountains. It was very it felt like how the entire trail should have felt, and it just felt like these were the moments that was that made kind of all the bad nights worth it, just sitting and watching the sunset with your friends, night after night. And I did feel like, everyone says, you've said it, and every other person we've encountered has been it's your last week, you have to cherish it, cherish every moment. And it's so hard to actually do that when you're in the moment and when you're hiking, and Maine and the 100-mile wilderness had such high hills. It was hard to be I need to cherish this climb. But at the end of the day, when you're just sitting there with your friends, it's wow, there's only 3 more days left of this, or wow, there's only 2 more days left of this. And I think that's kind of what I was feeling, was just I can't believe this is coming to an end. It didn't feel real,
To me, it almost felt like Katahdin was coming towards us, and we were crashing in on it, even though we were pretty slow moving, me and Trigger. It felt like it was happening so fast around us. Did it feel the same way to you? Yeah, well, especially if you did the 100-mile wilderness in 4 days.
Yeah.
So you get out the wilderness, you go along that straight road. Is it Golden Road or something like that? And you cross the bridge. So what was that like?
Well, so it was literally 90 degrees when I crossed that bridge. It was so hot, and we were going to the store. We were looking forward to cold drinks. Yeah. And I see my friend turn and look, and he holds up his phone. He was he was a bit ahead of me. And I see him from far ahead, and I'm is he lost? Why is he pointing his phone over there? And I'm just trying to catch up to my friends, trying to get to the cold drinks, and I'm just crossing this bridge with my head down. And at the very last second, I look over, and I was oh my gosh, there's no way that's Katahdin. And I almost didn't even notice, but then I was oh my gosh, she's right there.
Yeah, it's in your face, isn't it? It's a very in your face sort of picture for you. So what did you do there? Did you go into Millinocket, or did you just carry straight on to Katahdin Stream Campground?
Yeah, no, we just went straight to Katahdin Stream from there. And we camped, we went to the shelter that night. Right.
So tell me that, the night must have been, I know the night is I don't know, it's you get very reflective, don't you, when you're in your tent by yourself and so on. And did you plan to get up early? I mean, what was the plan?
Yeah.
What did you do?
Yeah, so I was with my 3 friends, and our plan, we wanted to finish by noon. That was the goal. So
up and down? Up and down?
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Well, we knew it was going to be raining.
Yeah.
And so we wanted to hopefully get in before the showers got heavier in the afternoon. And so me and Toasty, who are a bit slower than the boys, we were we're going to leave an hour before you, and then they'll leave, and then we can hopefully meet at the summit at the same time. And it actually worked out perfectly. So Toasty and I left at 5 a.m.
Right.
And then the boys left at 6 a.m. And we met for that last flat part on Katahdin is where
Tablelands,
yeah, that's where the 4 of us kind of started hiking together towards the summit. So it worked out perfect, but it was really nice just having the whole last day with my friends. Toasty and I met night 1 on the trail.
Wow.
And it got, after a while, it was just okay, we need to make sure we summit with each other. So the fact that we were able to do that, and we spent the entire climb with each other, it was actually the only time I was emotional yesterday was at the beginning of the hike, realizing this is my last day hiking with Toasty, someone that I've been hiking with this whole time. And so, we did the whole climb together, and she's very tall. She's and I'm 5'2".
Yeah.
So there were two points where she actually helped me up because, the rock scramble is just so crazy.
Isn't it surprising? I'd heard about it. I'd read about it, but I didn't expect it. I tell you, when you get out above the tree line, you suddenly see this wall in front of you. You think you've got to go that way.
Yeah. And I couldn't believe, I feel like everything on trail is so fear mongered, right? And no one talked about how hard Katahdin was. And I was like, this is the one thing that deserves to be fear mongered. It was scary. And in the rain, it was even scarier.
Wow. So you got to Table Ends and the boys caught up with you and so on.
Mm-hmm.
And I can remember that walk, obviously any danger's over, you're going to do it. You're just waiting to see the sign. With the rain so bad, how far away from the sign were you before you saw it?
It was pretty close by the time we saw it. Maybe like 0.1 away.
Wow.
It was really close.
You were drenched, weren't you?
So wet.
Oh, I saw those pictures. So
and it was so cold.
So what was that feeling then like? Did you touch the sign? What was it like?
Yeah, it was interesting because, it was a terrible weather day and we started so early. So we were the only people we saw on the mountains.
Nice.
And we were the only people on the peak for the entire time we were there.
Wow.
And we kind of we got there, we all hooped and hollered for a second. And then we just, we took our pictures and it was just we were so wet and so cold. It's and we had this entire scary, dangerous hike down the mountain. We're we have to get off the summit.
Yeah.
So I feel like we barely even had time to feel anything when we were at the top because it was just the weather was too bad. But we kind of, once we got back to town, we were able to talk about everything and process everything together.
Yeah, funnily enough, I'm glad you did that because I found it one of the biggest wrench was leaving people that day.
Yeah.
And ending up by yourself. You think, what's happened? And suddenly there's no one else who I'm hiking with around me. And that was kind of a strange thing. And by the way, did you put any thought to what your finishing pose was going to be like? I told you that was important.
Yeah, we talked a lot about it.
Excellent.
But then we didn't do any of the stuff we were planning because it was raining, and I was I don't want to stand up here, and there was no one there to take our pictures and everything. So it's we ended up not even doing half the stuff we wanted. But I think we got our poses, and it worked out.
Dear me, just a special moment. It's a special moment. You just will remember forever. And what about the climb down? The climb down actually took me about an hour longer than the climb up. Was it? Especially with the rain for you, it must have been really. Did you come down the same one, by the way?
We did.
Yeah.
The Hunt Trail. Yeah.
And that's tough, isn't it?
It was pretty tough, but I feel because then the four of us all hiked down together and we just had a really lovely conversation. I don't think it took us longer to get down because when we were going up, I was so terrified, and I don't get scared very often of climbs. I'm not scared of heights or anything, but just how wet it was, going up some of the climbs scared me a lot more than going down them.
Right.
And I think we did it in probably the same amount of time. I think it took us, we finished at 12:18, so it took me just over 7 hours to do the entire thing. And
are they still giving that? Are they still giving out that yellow card which says what number you are for the year or not?
Yes, they are. I think
what number were
you?
All right. What number were you?
285.
Well, congratulations. It's something you'll treasure that forever, I tell you. Promise you.
I was 1531 at Amicalola, and then I was 571 at Harper's Ferry, and then 285 at Katahdin.
Nice. Well, look, I'm not going to, but I may ask you. No, I'm not going to ask you what you're going to do next because you just don't know, do you? You're going to go home, obviously. No. I wonder whether you'll come back on the show in say 3 or 4 months and be retrospective about it. So tell me what we'll have a conversation, just see how you are and if you're enjoying it. But all I want to say is congratulations. And
Thank you.
You're the first and possibly the only one of our class in 2022 who's actually going to finish. So I'm super impressed, and I've thoroughly enjoyed following you this year. And I just only wish you well in the future. But I will contact you in about 3 or 4 months, okay?
Of course. Yeah. And thank you so much for being a part of this journey with me. You know, all your words of encouragement and advice, I've really appreciated all of it. Thank you so much.
Well, I appreciate that. And I'm so gutted you didn't do your pose on the song. But the pictures look great. Okay. Well, good to talk to you. And I'm going to contact you in 3 or 4 months, okay? And get you back on the show.
All right. Sounds great.
All right.
Can't wait.
Cheers then.
All right. Bye.
Bye. Awesome, eh? She's never had a word of complaint. She's been constantly smiling in her pictures on Facebook. It has been an absolute joy to follow. That she was able to summit with a friend she met on the first night is quite the achievement, and I'm sure it's something the two of them will remember until they're very old. Check out how white she is. I've posted the picture in the show notes. Before we hear from Katie, as she's on the verge of finishing the whites, I wanted to update you all on our Woods Hole weekend, which is going to take place from October the 6th to the 9th. Now, I know that I promised to have completed the schedule by now, but I'm afraid it's been delayed by a couple of days. But basically, this is what we're doing. On that Thursday the 6th, we meet at Weary Feet Hostel in Bland, Virginia, for lunch around noon. Then we'll head out onto the trail and hike a gentle couple of miles to Dismal Falls, where we'll set up camp and stay the night. We'll cook together, talk together, and we're hoping to get a Leave No Trace presentation from somebody from ATC. That part of the event is optional because not everybody's quite ready to camp out overnight. The next morning after breakfast, we hike back to our cars at Weary Feet and drive to Woods Hole near Pearisburg. That afternoon, all day Saturday and Sunday morning, we'll have presentations on anything you could ever want to know about hiking the Appalachian Trail. Our presenters will be me, Jester from the Jester Section Hiker podcast, and Pony, and new this year, Paul Collins or Skunk Ape. Paul hiked the AT in 2012 and will be talking about his passion, which is hammocks. It'll give you a real close-up look at your sleeping options. Paul will also be heading a section on building a fire. All the while, we'll be staying with the delightful Neville Harris at Woods Hole, and she'll be serving up her terrific food and getting everybody used to the hostel experience. For the first time, and we're really excited by this, each presentation will be filmed, and probably several weeks after the event, all participants will have a full film or series of films from the event. So if you miss something, you can easily watch it back. We're so excited by this added development and hope that some of you potential 2023 hikers or beyond will want to come and attend this great event. Places are limited, so reach out to me or to Neville at Woods Hole and register your interest. The full schedule and pricing will soon be on the Woods Hole website, and I'll be putting it on our Hiking Radio Network Facebook page as well. I'm really looking forward to meeting some of you there. Now, Katie, here she is. So we're back on with Katie. Hey, Katie, how are you?
Hey, Steve. How you doing? I'm fine. Tired.
You're tired, yeah. I'm not surprised. So how many days are you into this stretch?
This is day 11 for me, and hoping to summit Washington tomorrow.
Right.
So
you're sounding a bit. You are sounding a bit weary.
I'm feeling a bit weary. Yeah.
Oh, dear. But don't you think so? All around you, though, you're just seeing amazing, magnificent things, aren't you?
Absolutely. So did Franconia Ridge.
Yeah, that's what I want to talk about. I want to talk about that. Tell me how that went.
So I stayed at Liberty Springs Campground, and that set me up to the next morning to get up onto Franconia Ridge.
Yeah, is that the one with the tent platforms?
Yeah, everything in the white tent platform.
That's right. Yeah. How was that for you? Have you adapted to that?
Well, it's fine. You know, my tent is not a freestanding tent.
Oops.
So
yeah.
So I had to, you have to kind of work it, maybe stake it out with rocks and that kind of thing. So you make it work.
It's a nice little site, though, isn't it? Don't you think it's quite a nice little site?
Oh, Liberty Springs, yes. And I love the caretaker, Trix. She was lovely, and everything. They really have it set up nicely with bear boxes, and
Isn't it about a mile and a half up from there? I would maybe not even as much as that.
Right. It's not much of a climb. I can't remember exactly, but it didn't take me even an hour, I think, to get up onto the ridge after that. And just when I was up there, it was early, so I didn't see, I literally passed or, met like 4 people
Beautiful.
the whole walk.
Beautiful.
So, and it was cloudy. The clouds would move. It wasn't so cloudy I couldn't see other ridges, but as I was finishing up, getting toward the end of the walk, this woman passed me and said, "Oh yeah, they've been warning people off of the ridge today."
Oh really?
I thought, well, oh well, glad I started early.
So were you lucky enough to get that full length of the ridge in your vision, or was it cloudy all day?
Oh no, I could see it. Oh yeah, I was like above the clouds, kind of.
Awesome.
It was stunning, and I think that Franconia Ridge is really, it's going to go down there with, in my mind, Katahdin and all of, like southern Maine, the beauty of all that area. So it's definitely one of my favorites,
If somebody says to me, Appalachian Trail, my first thought isn't Katahdin. My first thought is always Franconia Ridge. I think, I think those moments when you see the mountains spread out in front of you, ever climbing and ever going down, then up again, then up, down, then up again. It's just a magnificent vista that, I'm not a religious person. I don't believe in divine intervention, all that sort of thing. But I've got to tell you, whoever designed it, if it was designed, was pretty well designed. It looks magnificent to the eyes. You kind of turn the corner and you suddenly see all this stretch ahead of you.
Right. It was, to me, amazing. And so, that will be something that I hope stays in my memory for a very long time. And, so the whites are hard. It's
really?
It's like, you're climbing and descending, and it's, rock scrambles and hand over hand, full body workout.
Yeah, certainly. And also, it's not always the easiest place to stay. Have you been staying in huts, doing work for stay, or paying to stay?
No. I stayed, I did stay at Zealand Falls, which was really nice. Yeah. And I stayed at the AMC Highland Center, but mostly I've camped. That being said, I am planning to stay at Lake of the Clouds and Madison, because it's just hard to get another, and not work for stay. I just went ahead and reserved it.
Oh, you platinum blazer, you.
Well, it's like, how bad do I want the goal, and am I willing to risk not getting the goal?
Yeah. So after that, so you're now heading towards Lake of the Clouds Hut, where you're staying tonight. I can't really recall that walk, that hike that day. I don't think it's terribly difficult, is it?
It's relatively not as bad as some of the others, So I'm just starting out this morning. And the first thing is a climb. Of course, you climb out. And
of course,
but not bad. Hoping that the weather's not supposed to be so good today, but I'm hoping tomorrow. I think it's supposed to not necessarily clear up, but the chance of storms is far less tomorrow. So
it's funny though. You've got to be very careful, obviously, with going up Washington, which is what you're obviously going to be doing first thing tomorrow morning. Mm-hmm. It is. Right. It's not a difficult. I don't think it's a difficult climb myself. I mean, let's face it, I could do it twice. So I mean, it's not that difficult to do. But that weather can change dramatically. So you should really be watching the weather when you start and really think about it.
It's nice. They have if you can get cellular, you have an app, or I can text to this number and ask for weather or forecast, and they'll give you the current weather, current forecast right away in real time.
Right.
So, yeah, I plan, as long as I have cellular, I'll make use of that. And I know that the next several days, it's going to be kind of socked in and, cloudy. So
that's a shame. But you know why it's a shame? Because some of the views are so magnificent. I mean, it is almost tear-inducing.
I've had good luck, so maybe it'll, like I'll get to the top and it'll clear out a little bit.
So tomorrow your plan is to do from Lake of the Clouds up Washington and then up to the bottom of Madison. Okay, right.
Yeah.
So that's I've told you the other day that the climb down from Madison is quite is very difficult. But so you're going to do that the following day.
Thursday.
Right.
Yeah, I'll stay at Madison.
But the climb down from Washington, I found surprisingly challenging as well. Yeah. So be careful with, you know what though, none of this is easy at this stage. However, you're very prepared. You've done it before. You've got your legs, you should be fine with it. You should be fine with it. So, so the exhaustion. So is that changing your hike? You slowing down a bit or what?
I had a couple of days that just like I did one 10-mile day from, I think it was, oh gosh, I can't even remember. I hiked to Garfield Ridge campground and it was a 10-mile day and I just was wiped out at the end. And yesterday I thought it was going to be a fairly straightforward, easy day. It was going to start off with a big climb out of I think it's Crawford Notch right there at 302, I believe. But I think I'm cumulatively now, because I've been going 11 days. I think my body's just not, at night, it's not recovering like it was before, not to the degree it was. So I am starting to feel it. And,
So when are you going to have a bit of a break then? When's that going to be?
Well, I descend Madison on Thursday if everything goes, works out for me. And I'll be done. I'll be done with the presidential. I'll be done with the Whites in New Hampshire.
Right.
And then I'll go back and get my car in Lyme, New Hampshire. Yeah. And drive back to do that small section home.
So how many miles? Well, once you finish this section,
I'm under 100. I'm
wow.
under 100.
Katie.
I'm like at 90 something, and it's like, so literally everything is about don't injure yourself.
That's right. Damn right. Yeah. And please, I don't want to frighten you. There's no need to frighten you at all. However, make sure you got good light when you come down Madison. Whatever you do, Madison is a kind of sharp. It's what you would, as a kid, draw as a mountain. It looks like it's just an inverted triangle. So you just climb up there, not inverted, you know what I mean. Anyway, triangle, it goes to a point at the top, and you think, oh, this is great. It's a rock scrambling climb, but it's really enjoyable. But coming down, oh my gosh, it is endless, and you will get tired. So be careful with that. Obviously, I wouldn't want to worry with that. But I would say it's one of the most exciting parts of the trail as well.
Well, good. It'll be a nice finale to the Whites.
That's right, yeah. And then what are you going to do then? You're going to have to take a couple of days off to drive home?
I'm going to, I'll go back to, I have stayed at this little place in Lyme, and then the next morning drive back to Virginia and probably maybe try to leave my car at Stanimals and get a shuttle to Glasgow and just go walk to Rockfish Gap.
Fantastic.
The southern gate of the Shinnies.
Fantastic.
And I'm done.
Well, when we speak next week, then you should almost be done, or you should be getting towards being done. Yeah.
I think I'll be in Virginia then. Yeah, hopefully. Keep those fingers crossed.
Yeah, very cool. All right, okay. Well, lovely to catch up with you, Katie, and just enjoy the next few days, because these are days that are going to stay with you forever. I promise you they'll stay with you forever. Just enjoy it, okay?
All right, Steve. Thanks. All right.
Okay. Cheers then.
Take care.
Bye.
Okay, bye-bye.
Less than 100 miles to go. How about that? When I was editing her conversation, I hope I didn't scare her too much about the climb down from Madison. It is truly epic, and I just hope that she has a blast. I know that I did. Thanks this week to our donors, all of whom are recurring donors: Lisa Rana, Brian Helton Jr., Ann Dobson, Woody Bass, and Natisha Webb. I appreciate you all more than you'll ever know. Finally today, A super long chapter 6 starts with this 15-minute block. George finds himself approaching Roan Mountain, named, apparently in those days, as Groan Mountain, the last 6,000-footer before Washington in New Hampshire. I remember it well. I'll see you next week. Chapter 6, Hump and Groan. Irwin, Tennessee to Damascus, Virginia. Tuesday, the 31st of May, 1983, mile 336.6. Then came the last days of May. Oddly, I found myself singing that Blue Oyster Cult song as I walked along the trail today. I don't know why, not that I actually walked much trail. I blew most of the day in Irwin, running an endless string of errands. I spent last night in my tent beneath the soft shimmer of southern stars in that large, gently sloping field beside the river at Nollichucky Expeditions. There was a picnic table, garbage cans, a building with showers and flush toilets, and the pleasant song of the river, all for $2. The people at Nollichucky were friendly, but seemed to merely tolerate backpackers rather than embrace our business, as the Nantahala Outdoor Centre does. The Nollichucky store contains virtually nothing in the way of backpacking supplies. I started walking down the gravel road at about 8:30 this morning, headed towards town. This time I got very lucky. A man driving a pickup truck stopped and gave me a lift before I was halfway to the main road. He dropped me to the post office, waited while I picked up my packages, and dropped me off at the laundromat way out on the outskirts of town near the McDonald's and the Pizza Hut. I got both loads of laundry going and sat down to open my packages. The running shoes sent by my brother were a joy to behold. I ripped off my boots and put them on immediately. The biggest thrill was the letters from home. I sat there reading them, exploding in constant laughter while everybody stared at me like I was a nut. I did not care. I was immersed in memories of my life before the Appalachian Trail, memories which were already fading into the mists. After 1 month of this all-consuming experience, my earlier existence seems dreamlike and unreal. Sometimes I get so lonely. I have no past and no future, only the trail and my obsessive desire to complete it. I washed all my clothes twice, the whites still emerged in a nice shade of grey. I shrugged and walked 2 blocks to the Pizza Hut and ordered a medium pepperoni pan pizza. The small just had not done it for me last night. The waiter told me that one person could not finish a medium pan pizza. I said, bring it. He then informed me that my pizza came with a free pitcher of soda, which of course I can never finish either. I said, bring it. I left the crumbs of my meal 45 minutes later and walked down the road to a shopping centre. I am legend in Irwin. I had to buy a whole gallon of Coleman fuel for my stove. Unlike Hot Springs and Wesser, no one in Irwin sells it by the pint or quart. I met a number of very nice people in Irwin, but overall its general atmosphere is not as friendly to backpackers as those other trail towns. None of the motels will rent a room to us. I bought batteries for my pocket flashlight, which had been useless for me for the past few days after I'd cleverly forgotten to replace them in Hot Springs. I also bought a package of envelopes to replace the ones I had to throw away. All those rainy days had left them glued together in one big useless mess. I walked over to the nearby grocery store and bought a week's worth of food. Not counting my short hike today, that is the time I'm allotting myself to reach Damascus. It's time for the lean, mean mileage machine to take control. I want to start catching up to the 14 miles per day pace I need to maintain in order to complete the Appalachian Trail in the 5 months I have. Tomorrow, unless it pours, I'm shooting for a 21-mile day to Clyde Smith's shelter. I walked out of the grocery carrying a stuff sack filled with clean clothes, another one bursting with supplies from my mail drop, a gallon can of Coleman fuel, the package I was mailing back home, and a large shopping bag of groceries. I staggered across the parking lot to the McDonald's, dropping my stuff off in a booth, ordered a milkshake, okay, so I was hungry again, I'm a grown boy, and carried it over to the restaurant's payphone. I called home and talked to my family for a while. Then I dialed a number I'd obtained from a girl behind the counter and called a taxi. I was not even going to bother trying to hitch a ride with all the crap I was carrying. The taxi arrived 2 minutes after I hung up. On the way back to Nollichucky, I had the driver stop at the post office and I mailed my package. After that, he drove me back to my tent. The 10-mile ride cost $5. I've encountered some incredible bargains in these southern mountain towns. Loading my backpack was difficult and time-consuming due to the massive supplies which I had to cram into it. I was not ready to leave Nollichucky until 5 o'clock. I noticed Ron's tent pitched nearby. I must have missed him in town. After filling my stove and my spare fuel bottle, I left the remainder of the gallon on the picnic table beside his tent. I was glad that he was there. He had shared a lot of good food with Dave and me on the night we met him. I know that it will come in handy. Ron likes to build great roaring bonfires at the shelters each night, and he is not a very patient man. When I was done, I hiked up the trail to Curly Maple Gap Shelter. Although that only got me 3 miles past Nollichucky Expeditions, I gained 1,400 feet in elevation, a factor which will ease the burden of tomorrow's long grind. The path climbed through a grizzled jungle of hemlock and rhododendron. The latter were just beginning to bloom, the first I've seen on this journey. Like most southern forests, this one was incredibly moss-covered. Each rock, every dead tree, and most of the live ones sported a thick, fuzzy green blanket. It seems another world from the forests back home, fascinating and, at the same time, alien to me. It's now 7:15 p.m, and it appears that I finally have an Appalachian Trail shelter all to myself tonight. With that, and the coming of the new month tomorrow, it seems a good time to reflect upon the progress of this quest. In town today, I weighed myself on an old-fashioned penny scale at the laundromat. Remarkably, I left a few more pounds on the trail between Hot Springs and Irwin, even while I was eating like a pig. I've now dropped more than 20 pounds in less than a month, 10 more pounds to go. I hiked 336.6 miles in May. Thus, in 29 days, I averaged 11.6 miles per day. I will have to do better in June, but I have overcome a great deal of adversity and I'm still here. More than 90% of prospective thru-hikers do not make it through the first 300 miles, and most are in better condition and much more experienced than I was. I'm still here. Wednesday, the 1st of June, 1983, mile 357.5. I was musing last night upon the manly nature of an Appalachian Trail thru-hike. An adventure such as this brings out the true spirit of machismo. It's satisfying for one to contemplate, as he sips his hot chocolate with miniature marshmallows and savours his frosted Pop-Tart, that he has discovered the essence of his own manhood. Just an observation. Monday night on the bank of the Nollichucky River had been a time of gentle breezes and soft starlight, but clouds had begun rolling in yesterday morning. By the time I reached the shelter last night, they were looking ominous. No rain fell overnight, but the day broke gloomy and foreboding. I left the shelter at 8:30 in a light, intermittent drizzle. 3 miles later, I had to stop to put on my rain suit. Rain was pouring down once again upon the mountains along the Tennessee-North Carolina state line. During the next few miles, the tempest grew in strength. To my surprise and relief, it all had minimal effect upon my psyche. The night of the Walnut Mountain monsoons had marked a major turning point in my ability to cope with extreme weather. As Dave and I were rolling in laughter through the puddles on the floor of that pitiful shelter, I realised that such things could no longer break my spirit. I'm content now to answer loud thunder with an occasional obscenity, more out of habit than anger. Swirling winds tore through the thickening fog, and the rain intensified as I climbed towards a peak known as Beauty Spot. Just as I broke out onto the large rolling meadows surrounding the summit, the rain abruptly and completely stopped. By the time I had made my way down to the edge of the woods on the other side, the clouds had begun to shred apart in the teeth of that wind, revealing steadily improving vistas of green mountains and valleys. I dropped my backpack and climbed back up to the summit. The wind faded to a good, fresh breeze. Soon I was basking in sunshine, watching little tatters of cloud drifting off into the sudden blue sky. In a fit of optimism, I removed my rain suit and the rain cover from my pack as I resumed my hike. I knew from reading the guidebook that the ensuing section of trail would be a killer, but I was more determined than ever to accomplish those 21 miles which had been my objective. Being stuck most of Tuesday in Irwin running errands had pushed my daily average down under 12 miles, and I was anxious to begin cranking it back up. The climb up Yanaka Mountain from Deep Gap was a real but not quite as bad as it looked in the map profiles. In those profiles it looked to be which is several grades of difficulty higher than in the Stefanos climb grading system. The lofty summit provided no views but was surrounded by a lovely grove of evergreens. The climb down bit the big one. The route was so steep, eroded, overgrown and blocked by so many large blowdowns that I eventually decided I must have wandered off the trail onto a herd path. I'd walked quite a distance since seeing a white blaze. Dropping my pack, I proceeded to waste a great deal of time backtracking to the last white blaze I had seen and carefully watching for turn-offs on the return trip. I eventually came to acknowledge that I'd never left the trail and that poorly blazed must be added to the list of its deficiencies. I grabbed my pack and continued onward into the unknown. Almost immediately I came across a white blaze which would have been visible had I only hiked a few more yards before turning back. I gave it the one-finger salute as I walked past. I passed through a low gap over a couple of little knobs before reaching Cherry Gap Shelter at 3:30. I'd completed 12 tough miles in 7 hours despite the rain and a 1-hour break on Beauty Spot. Acceptable. Someone had taped to the shelter wall a newspaper photo of Billy Martin with a handwritten caption. Billy says, "Northbounders, you can make it over Groan Mountain today. Tough it out." For northbounders, Roan Mountain is the last 6,000 footer on the Appalachian Trail until Mount Washington in New Hampshire. The climb we must make is so long and relentlessly steep that the mountain has been dubbed Groan. Making that ascent at the end of a 14-mile day from Cherry Gap would indeed be impressive. I will be tackling it tomorrow morning. I resumed today's grind at 4 o'clock. A climb out of Cherry Gap, which approached status, was followed by a long, steep drop into Iron Mountain Gap. I felt completely done in by then, but there was no turning back. In the map profiles, the final 6 miles appeared rather easy, but having learned not to take those simplistic diagrams too seriously, I plodded ahead warily, expecting the worst. What the profile represented as long stretches of virtually level trail were, in reality, a lot of stiff, short ups and downs whose aggregate effect was little actual change in elevation. I was dragging along, still 4 miles from Clyde Smith's shelter, when the sky abruptly grew dark and brooding. I gathered myself for one last spurt and began flying down descents and trudging gamely up steep climbs with renewed enthusiasm. In Greasy Creek Gap, I discovered that a trail relocation, so new it had not been in the guidebook, bypassed the final rugged knob. After 19 hard miles, that was indeed a blessed sight. Better still, the storm clouds had cleared as suddenly as they had appeared, and the sun returned without a drop of rain having fallen. I was just about down on my hands and knees, crawling, when I finally reached the side trail to the shelter. It was a long access trail. I staggered into the shelter at 8:20. Naturally, the shelter's water supply was a long way down a steep mountainside. I do not know how I made it back up. I had a huge dinner, including a whole package of freeze-dried beef in my soup, and what the manufacturer considered to be 6 servings of instant mashed potato. I have an awkwardly spaced series of shelters ahead of me tomorrow. The next 3 are, respectively, 5.4, 9.6 and 23.6 miles away. That gives me 4 realistic choices for tomorrow night. 1, stay at Roan Highlands Shelter, 9.6 miles, and try to do better the next day. 2, camp out and hope it does not rain. 3, try to hike 23.6 miles to Dan Nealon's Shelter, an extreme long shot. Or 4, stay in a motel in Elk Park, North Carolina. The road crossing is 19 miles away. The town is a 2.5-mile hitch. I will make my decision tomorrow when I see what I have left after today's meat grinder. Knowing how I feel about long hot showers and soft beds, you know that I would love to use option 4, but that would appear to be a long shot too. The terrain head makes today look like a Sunday stroll. At any rate, it is almost midnight and I must get some sleep. Someone's left a Billy Martin picture in this shelter too. He's staring dreamily out into space above the printed caption, "Billy waits for his next challenge." Underneath, the anonymous decorator has added, "Billy ponders, will Roan be as tough as Snowbird? I will find out tomorrow." Oh good, another challenge.